Morning, everybody. How we doing today? I wasn't scheduled to do an episode today, but I just felt some things I wanted to share. Yesterday, I caught some flack. Some of my social political viewpoints. It's strange to me how you can be overtly conservative and believe the things they say about the black community today and love jazz. I'm not sure how that's congruent in any way. The way the elite who govern the conservative side of policy have used race continuously to exploit the fear in white people, it's shameful. And if you recognize it in the past, you got to know what's happening in the future. And if you can't see it, I don't know what to tell you. But let me be clear. The rest of the world sees it. The charade that America has become, just because you can't see it, doesn't mean that everybody else can't. That just means you haven't poked your head out of the trees often enough. You're so interwoven in the fabric of the American cosmos, which has dissected you from the rest of the international fabric for a reason. They don't want you to have that perception. They don't want you to have that insight. They want you to think the entire spectrum goes from American left to American right. Even though that spectrum is really one side of a coin, center of right to middle right. That's the American political spectrum. There's no far left. There's no communism or advanced socialism. It's a robber baron state. Our tax base is being filtered off by the elite, and they're setting policy and telling us how to think, feel, and believe. And they've used race and ethnicity consistently. I referenced the Chicago Haymarket riots a couple episodes back, where these East European immigrants to Chicago in the late 1800s were organizing unions, demanding rights, 8-hour work days. I don't think they were even on overtime yet. They just wanted a little safety regulation and a decent wage for an hourly day. The robber barons at the time would just cut your pay when they felt like it. There was no guaranteed wage. If times were slow, you got paid less. And if you decided to strike, they would just replace you with scab workers. And there was riots, and the protests were turned into riots by the elite. They had cops that were overly armed, infiltrating and conflagrating these things, and it's the exact same thing today. The black community has constantly been at the butt of the economic gun for a long time, and it's still happening today. It's so synonymous and in stride with everything that's happened in the past. How can you be a jazz fan and be overtly conservative? And I'm not saying you can't have some conservative fiscal ideations, and especially if you have a higher income, I understand that. I don't maybe not agree with it, depending on how you earn that money, where it's coming from, but I understand why you would be conservative in your thought process. Higher taxes means less money for me, also means less services for you, also means more people who are out there desperate who might take from you, also means that there's a lot of people going to be around you who are going to be sick because they ain't getting proper health care. So it's not really just a bowl of cherries having more revenue in your pocket and less services for the people. And the money most people pay for insurance would be more evenly distributed if it came out of people's income tax, versus you paying your private insurance policies, and there'd be such a great disparity and inequality and a favorage to the elite and the rich. The rich can afford it. The poor got to keep their lights on. Healthcare would be nice, but I got to keep my kids in clean clothes for school. If you're a poor conservative, I don't know what to tell you. Your economic viewpoints have been so obstructed by the social constructs of the elite. You've been feared into voting with a fake morality play by people who don't really give a shit about that morality, but they know you do. And abortion and immigration and racial tension and the normal fear factor items. People who hate my God, people who hate my religion, people who hate my race. They're all coming to get you. Vote for us and we'll keep you safe from that. You know, abortion's evil. They're baby killers. That's smoke. That's not fire. That's something meant to cloud our vision. And I'm not going to go on and on about it. Just, I don't know how you can be anti-black and minority ethnicity today and be a jazz lover from the 1950s and 60s. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And for the most part, those people seem to leave my channel eventually, and good riddance to them. It's not like I don't welcome your thoughts and opinions, but you find it so indignant, the things I say. And I'm just speaking from how I feel. I'm not a political entity. I'm speaking from a global perspective, not from an American perspective. I'm a Canadian. Don't forget that. I was raised in a country that has a middle class still, and whose crime levels are 90% less than here. That's not a construct of anything else other than the poverty that capitalism has left people in this country. It's not a magnification of race. Race has become a justification and a finger pointing, but people can live in harmony and peace if they all have equal economics. People all have health care, good schools, and food on the table. How you pray doesn't mean a whole lot to me. But if I'm starving and my kids need to eat and I can't get my kids medication, I need to target somebody. And that guy at the end of the block, I've been told they hate my people, my race, my religion. I'm going to target them versus my own people. And it just prolificates this entire system. I didn't say that word right, but it's not coming out right. It just keeps the entire thing rolling. Jazz requires empathy to feel the message of it. And if you ain't feeling the message of it, you're just listening to notes. Posing like you're some sophisticated scholar who gets the advanced rhythmic play of the African American. No, get the fuck out of here. This is people bearing their souls into their horns, talking about the oppression and tyranny that you're still voting for. You may not like it, but do yourself a favor. Ask people in Europe, Japan, Australia, Canada, how they see right-wing policy in America. You haven't asked anybody, obviously. You live in this bubble that's all stars and stripes. And so you think there's just these two sides to this thing, and braids of the same rope. It's braids of the same rope. You're divided on social policy, so economic policy is never even discussed, and the engine marches on. Anyway, I want to talk about this record first of all. The great Herbie Hancock, who, in some ways, this is, what's the word I'm looking for? Boogaloo, before Boogaloo exists. You know, Sidewinder isn't coming out till next year. And again, the hit of that kind of creates the terminology. It's just like how Ornette Coleman does free jazz record. And now the entire genre becomes that, even though he had made 4 records before that, 5 records before that. And none of them really saw that as a term that really defined their music. The media grabbed onto it and it became. And it's the same thing with Boogaloo. There was tracks before Sidewinder that had that rhythm and blues soul groove that were just, they just didn't have the big success, you know. And this song, of course, goes on to a number of big successes. Mongo Santa Maria, does this song. Donald Byrd told Herbie to play it for Mongo. He was filling in for Chick Corea one night. Byrd says, "Hey, play that song you wrote, Watermelon Man." Mongo hears it, starts improv. This is at a club. Mongo starts playing with them. The band starts picking it up. Next thing you know, the whole place is having a blast. And Mongo Santa Maria is like, "Hey, Herbie Hancock, let me ask you something. What do you say you let me record that little ditty?" Which, of course, he does for Warren Keep News on one of their side labels, the Battle label. And then he goes on to make a few more great recordings for Riverside, actually, Mongo Santa Maria. But Herbie does it, of course, on this record. And this is an interesting lineup. Because you got young Herbie, who I don't think is even with Miles yet. He's about to be. He's on the cusp of that. Before the quintet is the quintet, Herbie's already playing with Miles some. They kind of... it doesn't become the official quintet right away. You know, I think until Shorter joins them. I think Williams is there. I think Carter's there. I think Herbie's there. And eventually Shorter joins them, and that's the second quintet is born. But this record here in 62 has Freddie Hubbard. And like I said, Freddie Hubbard can do anything. He can play your avant-garde. I got you, Eric Dolphy. He can play your straight fire. He can play the blues R&B. He's such a versatile player, Freddie Hubbard. Always that great tone, melodic, rhythmic center. It's never warbling or not clean. He's not like looking for the note when he gets there, like some trumpet players do. Like, oh, I'm trying to there it is. He knows. Him and Clifford Brown. You know, there's a few other guys. Booker Little has that, but it's not a long list of guys that are so clean and crisp and enunciate every melodic tone from its center on the trumpet. It takes some dexterity, some breath, some controlling of the embouchure. I dabbled in trumpet briefly in 8th or 9th grade for 2 weeks. I know it's not easy to play, and it's regarded as one of the toughest instruments to play. And most of the guys, you know, Miles included, Miles seems to kind of seek for the tone he's looking for at times. And I think he often gets miscredited as always bending the note. There's a difference between bending a note and not finding it right away. I'm a musician, enough so, and I played drums for years. And I know when a guitar player is bending a note because he knows what he's doing and intends to do that, and a guy that's going, shit, where is that fret? You know, it doesn't feel the same at all. Again, Dexter Gordon plays the saxophone on this record. So young Herbie is taking this fiery trumpet player who's also fairly youthful in his age. Then he gets a guy who's old enough to be his dad, Dexter Gordon, to play on his first record, who's one of the great classic center-of-the-road Herbie Hancock, Ben Webster, into Rollins lineage. Like, he's such a giant, Dexter Gordon. He had been a giant in the scene on the West Coast in the late 40s. He spends a lot of the 50s in jail for narcotics. And he makes his comeback in 61 at Jazzland, maybe even 60. And then 61 he goes to Blue Note. And so he's making a great string of records of Blue Note here. And Herbie drafts him and says, hey, will you be on my record? That's A, knowing your history and being connected to it. And B, it's offering you a chance to be a youthful experimental player, but with some roots and blues to anchor you. Because you know Papa Dexter's going to be like, hey kids, we got to stay in this pocket here. And it's a great validation. Dexter Gordon's playing on my first record. And Dexter Gordon in the jazz community is as big to the jazz community in 1962 as John Coltrane is to the jazz world today. And the jazz world today, like I've said many times, is a very limited scope into what people know and talk about, what's publicized, what's reissued. It's a very small chunk of the jazz kingdom that existed. You know, we know a few stories. We don't know the whole book by any means. It's a bit like Egyptology. We have quite a bit of information on a few of the dynasties, and even more so on a few of the pharaohs, but there's a lot of chapters that we haven't found a lot on yet. And the jazz kingdoms that got today, we know the Coltrane dynasty, we're familiar with the Miles kingdom, but we sure missed a whole lot of those other intervals. Which Warner Billy Higgins run on the rhythm section. And like I said, Watermelon Man really is a precursor to a lot of what Blue Note's going to come to do. And Herbie, of course, redoes it himself on the Headhunters record with his funk group in the 70s. And I played that at clubs many a time. And that's a fun, early in the night, people getting their first cocktail or their first beer sitting down. It's got pep, it's got groove. Fantastic stuff. Hancock's career is pretty amazing. His first 5, 6, 7 Blue Notes are all interesting in different ways. You know, it's not like he does the same thing over and over. By Empyrean Isles, by The Prisoner, it shifts and change. And then, of course, he goes into the what's the word? I can't think of his band on Warner Brothers. Mwandishi. He does those records in the early 70s, and then he moves to Columbia, and that really kind of changes him again, because the first Headhunters record on Columbia had limited success and not what Columbia had expected or hoped for. And so he's kind of forced to commercialize himself a little bit. And they're fantastic records. Thank God they do, because it's nice to have that stuff. And by Herbie's own admission, Watermelon Man, even here, was his first plotted exercise in writing something that he thought would be commercial. You know, a lot of the rest of his tunes doesn't really fit that way. I think he composed everything, which is pretty unique for a young kid. And he's one of the great composers in jazz. But he says that Watermelon Man was me trying to put together something that I thought would have commercial appeal and be sellable. And of course, Mungo Santa Maria had a big hit with the top 10 hit. And then, of course, he has his funk version of it later. The whole record's fantastic. More straightforward hard bop, post bop. Again, great composition. It's so fun to hear Hubbard and Dexter. Two of the giants on those horns. Two of my favorite guys on each horn. Hubbard's probably my favorite trumpet player when you take into a whole body of work. You know, if you just would take one moment or one song, you're probably going to take Clifford Brown. But if you're talking about a body of work, Freddie Hubbard's work is pretty unrivaled. It's just a fantastic body. And then Dexter Gordon, he's a top 3 saxophone player for me. You know, and that list changes to me more often than the trumpet player list. My sax players, there's a lot of guys in my top 10. There's probably 20 guys in my top 10. Depending on what day you asked me, what kind of mood I was in. You know, some days Illinois Jacket might be on the menu. Other days, like you say, let's have some John Coltrane. And there's a pretty big difference there. But yet they all still fit in the lineage. I don't want nothing too far out. And Coltrane's as out as I ever get. Anyway, great record. Great introduction. One of the true geniuses. And that's a word the jazz shepherd doesn't throw around much. I don't know how many times you've heard me say a true genius. I don't say that. And I don't really say this is great, buy it. I say what it's about, what it's telling me, and how it makes me feel. And you can decide whether or not you want to buy it. But I won't say this is someone's best record or this is one of the best records ever, because it's such an objective thing. It's not something I think has any value. You know, it doesn't really have any merit to say things like that. Another record I want to play for you now is this great Ann McCall record. This is on Regent, number 6040, if I recall. She's a great singer. She starts off playing with guys like Artie Shaw, Charlie Barnett, Woody Herman, a lot of the great white swing bands of the 30s into the 40s. She ends up recording with Charlie Ventura at Norgran in 53-54, and that gets reissued here on Verve in 55, maybe 56, as Verve 81-43. And I think it's all of her work together. There was 2 10-inches on Norgran. I think it's all right here on this one LP. And she's a great little singer. You know, she's got some Ella inflection in her voice, which is interesting to hear a white gal singing that kind of gospel tone at times. She doesn't have the blues of Ella, but she certainly has more guts than a lot of white gals give you. Another thing I want to really drive home here is I've often ripped the Savoy Art Department. And this is 1956, 57, okay? And it looks like it could be 1943. And I just want to drive that home with this. This next record here comes out the year after, on Jubilee. And she looks young, youthful, beautiful, attractive. Small town America's beeping. The artwork's kind of modern. This could have been on a CD that came out in 1994. The year before, Regent puts out this timepiece that looks like it's from 1884, sitting in a museum somewhere. Some gal singing songs of the French Riviera. Like, it doesn't look like even a jazz record. The photograph, how it's treated, it looks like an ancient artifact. The next year, technology didn't change that much. These guys were just some cheap, out-of-date bastards that didn't really care about art. They just wanted to make some quick money. And it's just crazy to me. Like, you wouldn't even recognize these two as the same girl. And it took me a second to go, wait a second. Ann McCall, that's the same gal that I have on Jubilee and singing with Charlie Ventura. And I was like, oh my God. She looks like some old hen sitting in a coop. That being said, it's a fun record. And it's a great group behind her. I'm going to read off who plays with her on this. Rudy Van Gelder and Ozzy Cadena put it together for Herman Lubinsky at Regent, which is a Savoy affiliate. And they eventually got to a point where they didn't want Lubinsky around during a lot of sessions. And Lubinsky was very hands-on early, but by 57, they're just like, dude, you create too much tension. You make people uneasy when you're here. And it's hard for these African-American kids to come in here and play when you're brooding. You know? So I guess he kind of had to take his hands off the wheel some towards the end of the 50s, which is probably a great thing because there's a small resurgence at Savoy in 57, 58, 59. Regent starts making some great titles. Savoy starts doing stuff like Yusuf Lateef and Sahib Shihab, and they do a couple records with Bill Hardman and Tanganyika Strut with Wilbur Hardin. Like, there's some modern stuff coming in there that happens that they need this last little burst of stuff from the canon. Again, the band on this, Zoot Sims, Selden Powell and George Barrow are on the tenor. Pee-wee Moore's on the baritone. So it's a nice little sax section, and it's even labeled as a new setting of brothers. Probably because Zoot Sims is a member of it here. And the Brothers was a famous thing from the Woody Herman organ, if I recall. The men of rhythm here are Nat Pierce on the piano, Wendell Marshall on the bass, and Kenny Clark on the drums. So it's a very integrated group, actually. And it's got a nice light swing to it. It's a fun record. These Regent records are not easy to come by. They're a tough thing to find. And this Jubilee record is actually outstanding as well. It's also got a great group on it with Teddy Charles, Jimmy Rainey, Oscar Pettiford, and Mal Waldron. So there's no slouching on that. That's a record I've had a long time, actually. And definitely something that if you see either of those, you should grab them. The last thing I want to show you is this Oscar Brown record. I want people to appreciate Oscar Brown because we talked about Watermelon Man, and I've talked about it before, how he takes That Dare, the great Bobby Timmons song, and puts words to it and makes it this fun new thing. He does the same thing with Work Song by Nat Adderley, Moanin'. He puts the words to Moanin'. And then Watermelon Man, which we discussed. There it is. He takes Watermelon Man, puts words to it, and it makes him a really unique guy in the history of jazz. He's actually improvising not just as a vocalist, but he's putting the words in there. He writes the lyrics to an instrumental piece that people know, and he puts words in that apply. But he has such a root in the black experience. You're hanging out in D.C. on the street corners. You're walking through the streets of Harlem when you listen to Oscar Brown. He's such a foot and mouth, tongue in cheek. He says things that are very risque, charged, socially driven, but he does it all in a very approachable way. And there's enough comedy that when he sings about the slave girl on the auction block, it makes you shake your head and wince, but it also makes you chuckle. You know, because she's got enough fat on that calf. Like he's, it's all you can do when you live in this life is to laugh about some of it. You know, the only way you could really relate such terror, tell a horrible story, is to make it laughable in parts. You're not going to watch the Titanic film unless there's a little romance, a little comedy happening on the side. Because if it's just the ship sinking, if it's just about lynching, ain't no one going to watch it. Oscar Brown has that same understanding. If I'm going to talk about things on the edge, on the cusp, I need to make it enjoyable and approachable for those people who I want to hear this. And so hearing him sing about the watermelon, and Herbie talks about how, as a kid, he used to hear the guy walking through the street with the cart selling the watermelons in the black neighborhoods. And it was as exciting as the ice cream man, watermelon man. And so he's capturing that black ghetto experience, that black neighborhood. And for the most part, blacks in America, you lived in the black neighborhood, which was the ghetto to white America. Very few blacks had the Miles Davis experience of living on a rural farm. That's pretty uncommon. The segregation of America is South African-like. You know, at that time and even today, there is integration. This is him doing a work song, you know. That's such a great record. This is his first record on Columbia, which I believe is also his first record, period. And it's such a brilliant record. And he does a lot of the late night TV circuit, and he kind of blows the socks off everybody. And he doesn't really get enough recognition today. And you can find this record for $2, $3, $4, $5. And you want to talk about a great record you can get for $5? It's this record. It's a fun listen. It's a challenging listen. It's got some depth and perspective and a social consciousness to it with a sense of comedy that if you put it on when you're having some friends over, you're going to end up talking about it. And there's a lot of jazz you can put on that no one's going to mention it and be like, hey, what, you know, that doesn't come up. We're talking about football. You know, you put this on, someone's eventually be like, hey, what are we listening to? This is cool. This is different. That's a value. Anything that's going to make people notice, that's a value. So, super fun record. And I wanted to show you the Watermelon Man version. And I was disappointed I didn't have the Mon Gomez Santa Maria record. Could have swore I did. But he's got a number of records on Riverside. A lot of them kind of reissued with different covers. And so that's actually one I haven't picked up because it's on the Battle label, not the actual Riverside label. Riverside has a few small subsidiaries that they use to issue certain titles. So anyway, that's today's little bonus episode. Like I said, I wasn't planning it, but I got the hoodies and the t-shirts for sale. A few of you have already grabbed them. Thank you. I think they're great designs. You know, I don't think they're just, you're not just saying, oh, I'm going to buy this to support the Jazz Shepherd. It's something you should be happy to wear. It's a very cool design by my friend Sven van Hooydonk in Belgium. And I'm so thankful to him for giving me that graphic design because I couldn't have done nothing like that myself. It's brilliant. It's perfectly in step with what the Jazz Shepherd's about. You know, the vinyl, the jazz typography, it's brilliant. So check that out. If you want to pledge support the channel, go to Patreon, and as little as $5 a month. And like I said, the stuff on Teespring, there's some great merchandise there now, so you can grab that, support the channel, and have some great gear to wear. And people be like, who's the Jazz Shepherd? You know, help spread the word of the gospel of jazz. And just to be clear, the sheep are my records, not y'all. You know, if I shepherd y'all in any way, that's a bonus. But I don't want people to think that I'm thinking of myself as the shepherd of people. People often think I think that's what it's about. And it has a nice duality to it, but the collection were my sheep. That was always how I envisioned that name, the Jazz Shepherd. This is my flock. And I think that one t-shirt with the records kind of illustrates that the sheep are my flock. And for those who volunteer that they're happy to be a member of the flock, I think it's a fantastic duality that I didn't even really envision at first. But it would be a great name for the fan club, as it were, you know, the Jazz Shepherd flock. But that's totally by chance, to be quite honest. Which actually is kind of a wonderful added bonus to when you have a good name. The Jack Shepherd name, oh, this is so awesome. The Jack Shepherd name is something I'm really pleased with. You know, it came about, and I'm like, yeah, it's just when you know you're happy with it. So this song cracks me up, but I was cool. What a great record. Y'all be safe. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.